I'll probably just go to that.
Okay, we're going to be live in a moment. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, welcome to the second session of today's Indigenous Alumni Living Library. My name is Ruth Shedd. I am the Director of Partnerships and Communications for the Office of the Vice President Indigenous at the University of Manitoba. Today, you have the opportunity to interact with some must-read books. In this case, the books are 4 extraordinary Indigenous alumni who have generously accepted our invitation to share their stories and to answer your questions. We have a number of student leaders also joining us today as our book hosts. Before I turn the floor over to this session's host, we have some special remarks from the University of Manitoba President and Vice Chancellor, Dr. Michael Benarash. Dr. Benarash started his term as president in July, and we welcome him back to the University of Manitoba. And I'm going to pass it over to you, Dr. Benarash.
Thank you, Ruth. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Tanzi, Bozu, and good morning. Today I bring greetings on behalf of the University of Manitoba, whose campuses are located on the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis people, of the Métis Nation. We respect the treaties made on these territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we dedicate ourselves to moving forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Thanks for joining us today. As Ruth said, my name is Michael Benarash, and I'm the President and Vice Chancellor of the University of Manitoba. I'm new to the role of President, but I actually am not new to either Winnipeg, Manitoba, or the university. I've lived here most of my life, and I served as Dean of the Asper School at the University of Manitoba from 2011 to 2017. And I've come to fully appreciate the rich community of our alumni here at the university and your contributions. And so I've had the opportunity to meet so many amazing alumni who have contributed both to our university, but to our community and to the province of Manitoba. And I've now come home to a place where that means so much to me, and the people that mean so much to me. And I have been warmly accepted back into the community after spending 3 years in Toronto. So people haven't held that against me yet. So it seems to have worked out okay. Being part of the community for many years, I know how essential alumni are to the variety and well-being of our futures and those of our family and friends. Today, I want to welcome you to the Indigenous Alumni Living Library, a virtual event that facilitates relationship building and the exchanges of knowledge. U of M remains committed to incorporating Indigenous ways of knowing and learning throughout the university and to advancing the priorities of our newly formed Office of the Vice President Indigenous, led by our alumna, Dr. Catherine Cook. A living library opens up the possibility for alumni to connect not only with current students, but also with the U of M and external communities at large. Today, we celebrate Indigenous alumni, their accomplishments, and how they are making a difference. In this session, you will hear from Métis Cree alumni, Fauna Kindon, who graduated from the Asper School of Business in 2006. I'd like to thank Fauna and the other living books participating in today's events. Students can benefit from hearing your stories, successes, and individual journeys, and apply them to their own experience at University of Manitoba and beyond. I would also like to recognize the staff in Indigenous Achievement who took on the challenge of adapting a typically in-person event to a virtual format, something we're becoming all too accustomed to today in this world. And of course, I'd like to thank you all for tuning in today. Take this opportunity to listen, to learn, to ask questions, and to get to know the alumni feature today and where their paths have taken them since graduating from U of M. I hope you enjoyed today's session. And something I've been asking everybody, if you're from Winnipeg, if you walk by me on the street while I'm going for a walk, say hello, tell me you're an alum of the University of Manitoba, and we can have a safe, socially distanced conversation. It's the way that I'm getting to know people now, since most people aren't coming into work. So enjoy today. Thank you. Merci. Miigwech.
Still, I did the classic, I'm still on mute. Thank you so much for joining us, Michael, and bringing that message to us today. As Dr. Benarash expressed, the Living Library is one way for us to be able to connect learners with those leading the way in their fields. So today, each of the book hosts is currently studying in the faculty that the book they are hosting graduated from. Before I introduce our host, I ask that those of you who have joined us by Zoom to just keep your mic on mute unless you have a question. Just raise your hand and the host will tell you when it's your turn to speak. You can also leave questions in the chat if you're joining by Zoom. And for those of you who are joining us by Facebook, you can leave questions in the comment section. We have someone who's sending those questions over to us. It worked really well in our first session this morning, so I'm looking forward to some great questions for this session. And now, without further ado, I'm gonna pass the Zoom mic over to our host, Tessa Robert Betz. She is a Métis student who is in her third year of study in the Asper School of Business, and she is majoring in accounting.
Thank you. So I would like to introduce Fauna Kindon, who is a Manitoba Métis Cree, raised in Iqaluit, Nunavut, and who now resides in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories. Fauna graduated with her Bachelor of Commerce honors degree from the University of Manitoba in 2006. She has a Master of Professional Accounting degree from the University of Saskatchewan and received her Chartered Professional Accountant designation in 2009. She has also obtained a Certified Aboriginal Financial Manager designation and is currently working towards a Certified Aboriginal Professional Administrator designation. Fauna is currently the Chief Financial Officer at Slito Investment Corporation and Group of Companies. Now, Fauna, I would like to invite you to tell us more about who you are and where you come from.
Well, hi everyone, and thanks for inviting me to this event. So I am originally from Iqaluit, Nunavut. That's where I was raised. At that time, it was Frobisher Bay NWT. Obviously, a lot has changed from now and then. So that's where I spent all of my education, my primary and secondary education. So I graduated from Inukshuk High School in 2002. It's going back a while. So that's where I was raised. And then I decided to go to University of Manitoba to get my undergrad. So that's kind of where I transitioned out of Nunavut into Manitoba, still going back and forth at Christmas and summertime to work for the 4 years that I was in my undergrad. So that's kind of the journey, leaving Nunavut, and something that probably most people don't know is that in order to go to university, there is no university in Nunavut, so you have to leave the territory. And so for a lot of people, that can be really difficult because, it's a whole new change. So in order to pursue post-secondary education, it's quite a bit of sacrifice.
Sure. And why did you decide to go to university?
I don't really know if it was ever something that I considered not doing. I think I came from a family that was, my mother very much encouraged me. It wasn't really a choice. It was more like, you're going. And I did kind of fall into that idea of, oh, well, I'll take a year off and, work. And she was like, absolutely not. You are not doing that. Because once you get into that kind of, you have time and you have money and you're not going to want to go back to university. So she's like, absolutely not, you are going. And so that was that. So I applied to a number of universities. So I got into quite a few. So but I chose the University of Manitoba because I wanted to be closer to the family, my extended family that I did have. My parents are both originally from Manitoba. My mom is from northern Manitoba, and my dad is from northwestern Manitoba. So it just kind of made sense that way. And whenever I'd have vacations, I would want to go to Winnipeg or Manitoba. So that's kind of the roots were there. And I wanted to pursue and be closer to my Métis Indigenous Cree culture. Growing up in Nunavut, it's, it's Inuit, it's 85% Inuit. So, which is a beautiful thing, I think. But growing up, I knew I was Indigenous, but I thought I was Inuk because all my friends were Inuk. I was 5 when I moved there. And so I just kind of thought that's what I was, and I wasn't. And and so kind of one of my friends was like, "You're not Inuk, you're something else." And I was like, so I went home and kind of surprised. And so my mom, I asked my mom, I said, "Well, somebody told me that I'm not Inuk," and she's like, "You're not. You're you're Métis and you're Cree," and there's this. So it was totally a mind-blowing experience. So ever since that, kind of learning about my own culture, I wanted to relocate to Manitoba to kind of pursue that part of my ancestry.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And we also have a question here. Did you always want to go into business?
Well, I think yes. I think when I was one of those weird kids that really knew from a young age that I wanted to be an accountant. And I didn't know why. I just remember driving through, I think it was even Winnipeg, and I said, "Oh, there's all these tall buildings." And being from somewhere like Nunavut, there's only one high rise kind of thing. And so I said, who works in all these tall buildings? And my parents said, "Well, it's typically like accountants or lawyers or, different business people." And so from that moment, I was like, oh, I was really interested in it. And I was like, I'm going to be an accountant, and didn't really think about it at the time. I just kind of always knew I would be. And so I think I kind of looked at it as, what, even if I change my mind later on, it's always a really strong base to have anyway, because you can always use that business sense and accounting kind of mindset in whatever field you choose to pursue.
I have a very similar story into why I went into accounting. But I'm also wondering if you have any memorable memories from your first year at university that you can recall?
Yeah, I mean, so University of Manitoba is a large university. I mean, there's like 30,000 people, at least there was when I was during my first year. So that was more than the entire population of Nunavut, where I was from. So that was quite overwhelming if you think about it. And I was living in residence. So at the time, Taché was a residence. And so it was overwhelming in the sense that I was 17 at the time. I didn't know anybody. I was from somewhere really far, and people didn't really understand. It was kind of new still. Nunavut was only created in 1999. So, there was still kind of a lot of curiosity about it. And yeah, I remember feeling quite overwhelmed, but luckily with everyone living in residence, it kind of forces you to meet people, and that's the whole purpose of residence. So I was really lucky to meet some really great people, and I'm friends with some of them today. So it really is about embracing, the opportunities and meeting people and kind of stepping out of your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. What dreams and goals inspired you to succeed?
Well, I mean, I come from, my mom is Indigenous and my dad is Norwegian Welsh. And on my mom's side, she went to residential school, and she comes from a very large family. She's a kibosh, and she comes from 17 children. So my grandparents had 17 children. So very, very large family in a very small community called Thicket Portage. And so she was the only one to graduate from residential school. And that's that, and she had a, somewhat of a good experience in residential school, thank goodness. But, so that's a rarity. So I think education was something that my mom really, really instilled in me to say, you know what, you're going to I want you to pursue these things, maybe things that I didn't get to pursue. So, I think there was a lot of that kind of encouragement, just to kind of, be able to be independent and to, do what I wanted to do. And so that was kind of, really kind of encouraging, I think, and motivating. And, not a whole lot of people in my family got university education. So.
Yeah, it's very powerful. And how did you connect with the Indigenous community on campus when you got to the U of M?
So that was something that I was very purposeful in doing. So at that time, they didn't have like the Indigenous, Indigenous center, but I did purposely go out and find like the Aboriginal programs, like the Access program, and I joined the, which is now IBEP, the Indigenous Business Education Partners. So I did join that right away, knowing that, okay, I'm going to go into commerce. This is my path. So I did, join those groups. And I did also some volunteering with some other organizations, kind of like a Indigenous big brother, big sister type thing, where I'd go to schools and work with Indigenous, typically young ladies. So, always making sure that I was overtly trying to be involved.
And what were some of your favorite memories from your time at the U of M?
Favorite memories, that's a good one. I actually really, like the Asper School of Business, I think, was a really great building. And I really liked meeting all the people and the professors. Some of the professors are so great and some of them are still there. But just really, really great professors, and really just kind of like the camaraderie and how the classes were so good and everyone was really laid back. I never felt like out of place or anything like that. But again, that was my experience. So everyone's experience is a bit different, but yeah, just kind of everyone's there for the same goal, right? To pursue education. And so I think when everyone is kind of in the same environment with the same mission, it's quite empowering.
Definitely, for sure. So we have a question from Carla on Facebook asking, do you have any advice for students who come to university from a remote community?
Yeah, it can be quite overwhelming. And I remember one of the challenges I had was kind of this stockpile mentality. So people who are from remote communities will know, like when you go south, you buy lots of things and multiple quantities, because you basically almost stockpile for when you go back. And so, for example, clothes has to last you like months because typically, you're not going to be able to go shopping, food, that type of stuff. So it took me a while to kind of get used to like, okay, I don't need to buy 5 things. I just need to get through like this week kind of thing. So kind of changing my mentality there. Also asking for help. I think things like things that a lot of people kind of maybe take for granted, like bus routes, how to do that, how that works, safety in large centers, was making sure, like really it's about reaching out and asking questions. I remember, getting on the bus and being like, okay, I need to get there, just asking for help. I think that's a big one. And really about finding, similar like-minded people. So join groups, join Indigenous groups, join, whatever. There's so many different types of groups that you can join, whatever your interests are, but it really is about getting out there, because if you kind of pull away and isolate yourself, you'll feel really isolated and overwhelmed. And that's not good for anyone's mental health. So it really is about stepping out of your comfort zone, and that's how you grow and that's how you learn.
Great advice. And moving on to a more current question here, what is your current job and how did you land it?
So my current job, I'm the Chief Financial Officer for Clecho Investment Group. So essentially we are an Indigenous owned corporation. So we are owned by the Clecho government. So the Clecho government represents, in this case, 4 different communities in Northwest Territories. So we run a variety of different companies servicing primarily the Northwest Territories. And so I am the head financial person for that. So I work closely with the Chief Executive Officer and the Board of Directors to make sure that we're achieving what we set out to do. And in terms of how I landed it, I was in Winnipeg for a really long time. After my undergrad, I went to Saskatchewan for a while to pursue my master's at the University of Saskatchewan. And then I went back to Manitoba and I stayed there for a number of years. And I was previously with the First Nations Financial Management Board as their senior manager for Central Canada. So working with First Nations in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Northwestern Ontario, and NWT. And it was a very good experience. I was happy there. And then I got, when you're in kind of this field, there's like people we call headhunters. So they'll essentially come and, propose potential jobs for you to apply. And so I kind of just got used to like ignoring because I wasn't looking. But this one kept kind of calling and emailing and being very, very persistent, more than normal. And so I was kind of like, oh, that's interesting. And so I actually went to the Inspire Awards in Ottawa before COVID. So that was, I think, in February, early March. And I bumped in and I sought out somebody who was in this field. And so I had kind of said, I proposed like this offer that I was getting. And she was very encouraging. She was like, you know what, I think you'd be perfect for this. It'd be such a good opportunity. And you're from the North. And so without even knowing it, I think I was already interested. And so curiosity turned into action. And then I applied and here I am. But I wasn't overtly looking. It's kind of one of those things where I think if it's meant to be, then the opportunity will find you. And that's exactly what happened.
Awesome. And what has been your biggest motivator throughout it all?
Biggest motivator. I think it's just about really kind of being independent and, being able to stand on my own 2 feet and do what I want to do and not have to depend on someone else or family to give that to me. And I think it's really about wanting to earn things myself and to know that, I'm strong. And even if something happens, I can get through it. And it really is. And I always told myself that I wanted to stay in the Indigenous sector. And some people are like, well, what is that? Kind of laughed a little bit. But in my mind, there is an Indigenous sector and there should be an Indigenous sector. And we need Indigenous professionals to be in the Indigenous sector. Because if nobody's going to work for us, we have to work for ourselves. And so that's really kind of my motivating factor is to say, okay, how can we get our people into a better place? And so that we're not relying on people outside of our own culture to give back. So that was kind of my motivator to specifically focus on Indigenous companies and Indigenous causes.
Wonderful. I could not agree more. So we have a question here. You sit on the board of directors for Inspire. How did you get involved in the board work and what advice do you have for the students seeking these types of opportunities?
So Inspire and we go way back. So when I was a high school student, I applied for scholarships and I received 2 bursaries from what was then the National Aboriginal Achievement Foundation, which is now Inspire. So I received 2 bursaries at that time. And then when I went to my undergrad, they supported me, I think 3 out of the 4 years. They gave me financial support. And then they also supported me through my master's. And then I received the National Aboriginal Achievement Youth Award. So I went to the award shows in Saskatchewan and won that scholarship money as well. So through that opportunity, I also did speaking events at all their conferences. So they have a few national conferences a year. And so I would speak at those events. And I had actually reached out to Roberta Jameson, who is and was the CEO for Inspire. And I said, you know, I'm really, I feel like I've done kind of everything from, you know, beginning to end with Inspire, and I really like to be on the board. And so just kind of putting a feeler out there. And so then they sent me an invitation to be on the board, I think a year later. And so that was kind of my journey with them. And so I feel like it's kind of full circle because I've seen Inspire from, you know, where it was and where I was, just a high school student applying for scholarships, hoping to go to university, that kind of thing, to now being on the board and being able to make sure that we're still trying to meet the need of Indigenous students pursuing post-secondary education. So Inspire has been a huge part of my journey. And so now it's just my honor to really be part of Inspire and to give that back.
We have a question from Andrea. What is one piece of advice you would offer current students that you wish you knew when you started in university?
To not stress out so much. I think when you're a type A and you really, really want to succeed and you're studying and you're not sleeping and you're not socializing, and it really is, it can be quite exhausting and not enjoyable. And really looking back, there was no need to be that stressed. Yes, you want to do a good job, and yes, you want to manage your time and all those things, but at the end of the day, you don't remember what you got on your exam in corporate finance, you know. So really it's about kind of putting everything in perspective. And I know when you're in it, you're like, this is my world. But really looking back, I wish that I had kind of calmed down a little bit. And maybe that's just, you know, maturity speaking, but I think, you know, kind of put everything in perspective and really take advantage of other opportunities in university that it offers, because it offers, you know, volunteering opportunities, social opportunities, not just academics. And I think going back to Inspire, and really any scholarship program now, they're looking for more of a well-balanced person. They're not looking for the book smart 4.5 person. They're looking for even a 3.5 person GPA. But you know what? They volunteer, they're active in, you know, student politics, they give back, they kind of stretch themselves in other areas. And so that's what it's about. I think it's really about meeting people and networking and kind of creating those connections. It's not just about your grades. And so that's kind of one thing that I would focus on.
Yeah, as a current student, I appreciate the reminder for sure. So we also have a question here. Did your professors bring real business experience into the classroom when you attended university?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, I remember even one example. I was taking accounting, and one of the professors had basically said about, you know, brought in real stories about, you know, fraud or actual instances where they were part of. And so I still remember those stories. Because it's not really the theories and the textbooks you remember, it's the stories. And so I do remember, yeah, they definitely bring in real world experience. And if any professors are listening, I would really encourage you to use actual real life stories to kind of illustrate the actual theory behind it.
I could not agree more. And what was it like being the only Indigenous graduate in your class?
Well, it was surprising, to be honest. I didn't know that until I got to the actual award ceremony, and then they gave out an award to the Indigenous students, and I was the only one on the agenda. So yeah, I was surprised, especially because I was in Manitoba. Manitoba has such a high percentage of Indigenous people. So I was very surprised, proud, obviously, of being representing. But at the same time, I was like, something's wrong here. There should be more of us, and that's still true today.
Certainly. Would you have any advice for other students who may be the only Indigenous students in their fields or in their studies?
Yeah, I mean, I talk lightly on this only because I know that I don't look Indigenous. So I want to make it very clear that I don't quite understand that part of it. Because I'm half white, I'm a half Native. So I get that I don't look like the stereotypical Indigenous person in a class. So I don't pretend to be. One thing I would say is that when people did find out, I don't like it when I'm kind of asked to speak for an entire group of entire demographic. So more to the people who are not Indigenous, when you do meet an Indigenous person, don't ask questions where they feel like they have to speak for an entire demographic. My opinions are my opinions, and my thoughts are my thoughts, and my experience is my experience. So kind of, I really don't like the whole tokenism idea. And so, yeah, I know it can be difficult, but I think you just have to, realize that, yes, there should be more of us, and that's what I think even venues like that, like today, even, opportunities like this to kind of speak, to be like, no, there needs to be more of us. We shouldn't be the only ones in a class, in any class. It really is up to us to inspire other people and to motivate our youth to want to pursue post-secondary education. And that doesn't have to be university or college. We need tradespeople. We need Indigenous employment everywhere. And so don't feel like, oh, I have to go to university or I have to go to college. No, you pursue what you want to do and what you're talented in. But again, we shouldn't be the only person in any area.
Yes, thank you for that message. Can you describe one of your typical work days in your current employment?
Well, it's always kind of different. This week we had board of directors meeting. So the 6 board of directors met with our senior directors for Cleat-Show Investment Group. And so we met to go over our strategic plan for the next 3 years. So it was a lot of kind of brainstorming and, idea sharing, and try to figure out what direction do we want to go and how are we going to pursue that together as a team. And I prepared the financial presentation showing, what our budget is, where we're going, where I see us going, where I see us landing, why I see us landing there, and presenting the actual financials to them to say, okay, this is where we're at, we're on target or not on target. And so that was my week this week. And then I'm also meeting with my staff. We're hiring a few new people, making some changes. So it's always kind of different, my day-to-day type thing. But I always try to make sure that my team are happy. I really believe in, operating as a team. And so I want to make sure that my staff are, happy, they're not stressed. So I try not to be stressed. And it's really just about tone at the top. Because I remember working in corporations where I remember looking at, people who were at the top of an organization when I was at the bottom and thinking, I don't want to be like you. I don't want your lifestyle. I don't want your unhappiness. And so that kind of resonated with me, and saying, okay, if I don't want that, and then I'm going to be the person I want to be, and I want to be the boss and the leader that I want to be. So I think it does start at the top. You know, if I'm negative and grouchy and demanding and micromanaging, my team are not going to be happy, and they're not going to stay. And I want them to stay, and I want them to, you know, want to come to work. And I think that's important.
Certainly. What skills are required in your position on this day-to-day basis?
It's a lot of multitasking, and you know, it's kind of different things. It's dealing with the bank, it's dealing with governments, it's dealing with our board of directors, it's dealing with my boss, the CEO, dealing with my staff. Sometimes there's HR issues. It's negotiations, partnership agreements, financial, you know, projections, where we're going to be, kind of keeping your finger on, you know, where the market is, any opportunities that might come up, strategic planning, you know, forecasting, and, you know, variance reporting, developing key performance indicators to make sure that, you know, we're on target, that we're doing things in the best way. So a lot of kind of policy development, and I would say continuous improvement. How can we do things better? And so that's very much a focus here at this organization, is how can we do things better? And that again comes from my boss. So it really is very you have to be able to multitask for sure.
Yeah. Do you have any networking tips you can share, especially for shy people?
Yes, I think in terms of networking, the way I think about it is that everyone, I think for people who are intimidated, the way I think about it is that everyone is better at something. And so it really is about finding what that is for you. And so, you know, sometimes when we walk in a room or we meet somebody and we say, oh, well, they're prettier, or they're, you know, they make more money, or they're smarter, or they're more educated, or whatever, the list goes on and on and on. But what are they saying about you that you're better at? And so everyone has something that they're better at. And so it really is about harnessing that. And it is uncomfortable to kind of, you know, just go up to a group, and network. But I think there really is an art to it. And it isn't about, you know, being loud and boisterous and, you know, I'm going to get my way in there. It's really, I think, about just being polite and being respectful and asking questions that you're genuinely interested in. You know, and starting dialogue with people that you think you might have things in common. And if you realize that, you know, you don't, then you just kind of move on. And so things are, it really is about, I think, finding people that are like-minded. And if you're shy and you notice somebody else is also shy, kind of standing off in the corner, go up to that person and say, hey, you know, what brought you to this event? Or, you know, and likewise, if you're outgoing and you notice somebody shy, kind of standing off in the corner, go up to them. It really is about, I think, inclusion and not wanting people to feel excluded.
Certainly. Yeah. So going back to your path, in your career path, was there anything in particular that drew you to the designations that you have today, or the path that you took?
Well, at the time when I was in university, there were 3 different accounting designations. There was CMA, CGA, and CA. And I knew I wanted to be CA, Chartered Accountant. So I definitely knew that, and I would say even my second year I knew that. And then I heard about the Masters of Professional Accounting program at the University of Saskatchewan. And that's a different stream than the normal CPA program. And you get your master's at the same time. while, you know, preparing for your CPA exams. And I was like, oh, I want to do that. And so I applied and I got in 2 years ahead. So I was already like basically pre-approved. So I knew in 2005 that I was going to my master's program in 2007. And so that was an unfortunate thing for me. It kind of took like the stress off of, okay, I already kind of knew that path. And so that was my kind of my path to my master's program. And then after that, I finished my articling, and I remember I finished my articling on my 25th birthday. So I officially had my master's and my CA designation on my 25th birthday. So I was ecstatic. And you know, but I think you never want to stop learning. So I got the I was working with First Nation for a number of years, and so I got my Certified Aboriginal Financial Manager designation from AFOA Canada, and I also just got my CAPA designation, so my Certified Aboriginal Professional Administrator designation from AFOA, and I also I pursued my Financial Modeling and Valuation Analyst certification. So it's really all about kind of using, especially during COVID, it really is kind of about using your time wisely. And I was like, you know what, I might as well just keep learning and keep kind of expanding my knowledge. You're never, you know, it's never too late to do the different things. And I always kind of want to challenge myself and keep myself motivated. But I think in terms of why I chose those designations is because they are Indigenous focused. And I think the Indigenous sector, and especially with First Nations, it is a very specialized area. How they're funded, how that money flows through, how their budgets work, the different programs. It really is its own area. And so I know that, and I value that, and that's why I pursued those particular designations.
Amazing, yeah. And how did your university degree and experience post-graduation affect your life in general?
I think it just gave me opportunities, right? I think education, that's what it is. It gives you opportunities. And like anything else, you have to take advantage of those opportunities. And I think in our society now, university degrees are basically the minimum that you need, especially I would say in business. And so it's no longer, you know, high school is enough. It's, you know, okay, well, if you want to get into business or any other kind of major professions, you need an undergrad degree. And so I think knowing that, that's kind of how it's changed my life. It's given me opportunities, and even beyond the education, I would say it's really about how you grow as a person, because, you know, you learn how to manage yourself and you take responsibility for yourself. You know, you're choosing which path you want to go. You're choosing which courses you want to take. You're choosing when you get to choose those courses, when your classes are. It really is about taking responsibility for yourself. And so, especially those people that are moving from a remote location or a far location, you know, it really is about being independent and being self-sufficient for the first time. And so it's about taking responsibility for yourself. So no longer did I have, you know, my mom waking me up for school. It was all up to me. So I think that's really what it is. It's learning your strengths and your independence, I think, during those critical years.
For sure, yeah. And what was the best part about the Indigenous Business Education Partners program?
Oh, definitely the people. Yeah. I'm still friends with a lot of them. Actually, and in my previous job, I hired 2 alumni from that program because I'm like, oh, I already knew them, we were friends. And I was like, you know what, they're perfect. I want them to work with me. Like, and so I think that's the kind of networking I'm talking about. It's, you know, we're still friends to this day, you know, and it all started from that program. So it really is about, and I think what's unique about that program is that we're all connected. We all understand each other. We all understand kind of different battles, different issues that we face, and we all had kind of similar sense of humor. I think that really helps. Was a really great program, and I'm a huge fan of IBEP because it provided just a little bit more support and understanding that I think I know for me was hugely beneficial.
Yeah, as a member of IBEP, I can certainly attest to that as well. But can you talk a bit about applying for bursaries and scholarships and how to use that to pay for school?
Yeah, so I always tell people that my whole education was paid for. Sorry, my director of finance. Yeah, I got my whole education paid for through scholarships. And people are like, oh, it's because you're Native, you automatically get school paid for. I'm like, no. I had to apply and I had to earn it, and nothing was given to me, just like nothing is given to any of us. And so it's kind of a misnomer that, oh, Indigenous people get their school paid for. It took a lot of work. And, it was applying, writing essays. So I would have like a stock kind of essays, and, or I would write a custom one, specifically for ones where they were asking for, more of a focused area. And I had all that, and I had photocopies of, education I've received, or awards I've received, or even newspaper clippings, participation certificates, whatever it is that I had, I would make photocopies of, and I would have them kind of filed and be like, okay, I'm gonna put this here. I'd have like Fauna's volunteering activities, and Fauna's academics, and Fauna's community, and whatever it was. And I would put all that in it. And so eventually it just became much quicker. I think the first time you do it, it's like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do? But once you kind of get that first application done, it's very easy to transfer it to another application. And I think now it's a lot simpler because there's organizations like Inspire who kind of consolidate all that knowledge and all those opportunities into one. So you just need to apply once, and it goes into the nomination pile. But I think really you have to don't be intimidated by the process, because again, like, somebody has to win them. And if everyone thought like, oh, they're not going to pick me, then nobody would apply and nobody would get it. And that does happen, where somebody puts out a scholarship and nobody applies and the money just sits there. So really is, again, up to you, up to the students to really kind of fight for themselves, because if you're not going to apply, nobody's going to do it for you. So really get out there and try.
For sure. And thinking back to when you started, did you envision this is where you would be exactly, or has that changed?
It's definitely changed. I didn't know. I mean, I didn't think I would end up in NWT. I thought maybe Nunavut at one time, that I would go back home. But I really, I was surprised at myself that, I ended up in Yellowknife. Although that just happened in May. I moved up in the middle of a pandemic. But I think that, I surprised myself. But I thought at the time, yes, Winnipeg was great to me. And it's still there. But I think I thought, I'm going to look back on my life and I'm going to regret. I didn't want to regret things. And I think I'm one of those people where I think you regret the things you didn't do, or you wonder about if I had done this. And I didn't want to have that. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to do it. This opportunity is presenting itself for a reason. And if I don't take it, I don't want to regret it. And I'm glad I did it. So those are the types of things that really kind of challenge you at the time. And now that I did it, I'm like, oh, obviously, you know. So I think I'm surprised at the location that I ended up at, but I'm not surprised at, I guess, the position or the particular job, because this is exactly what I envisioned, working for Indigenous peoples, working in an Indigenous corporation, and that's what I love to do. So in that part, no, I this is exactly where I want to be, and I hope that more people will join me in pursuing Indigenous business.
Certainly. So we have time to take one or two more questions before our hour is up. But while I give people a chance to think of last minute questions, is there anything else you want to tell us, or a little piece of advice that you'd like to end off on?
I think during, especially now during COVID and during this pandemic, it can feel really, as students especially, I think they can feel really alone and kind of, what's the point? But I really encourage you to reach out and to, join up with whoever, join up with, whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's another group or an Indigenous group or support group, whatever it is. But really, I think reaching out and feeling connected, because I think right now everyone can feel so alone and disconnected. That really, I think the hardest part is reaching out and asking for help.
Certainly. So I don't see any other questions coming in, but I'd like to thank you, Fauna, for speaking to us. And I'd also like to introduce Karen Richard, the events coordinator, to close it off.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Indigenous Alumni Living Library event. I would like to thank you, Fauna, for taking the time to talk with us today. On behalf of Indigenous Achievement, we are gifting you this beautiful U of M beaded pin. I don't know if you can see it. It's absolutely gorgeous. And a copy of Braiding Sweetgrass, the book.
Great.
And the Briar Patch, the Land Back issue magazine. So I will get those to you by mail. And I also want to thank you, Tessa, for doing such a great job interviewing. And we also have a gift for you from the bookstore at the U of M, and I will mail that out to you as well. So this concludes session number 2 of our Living Library. So please join us for session 3 with Diana Rusin at 1 o'clock. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you, Karen. And Fauna, I'm just going to put the spotlight back on Fauna here. She has a U of M stole. So if you're an Indigenous student at the U of M and you come to graduation powwow, or if you graduate and you can't come to powwow, you get one of these stoles that shows that you're an Indigenous graduate. And so Fauna has hers as an Indigenous alumna. And thank you so much for joining us and taking time out of your day. And thank you so much, Tessa. Great interview, great questions, great answers. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.